Hello, welcome to Raymond Castile's Basement of Horror. Today, we have a Ghostbusters episode. Yay! Now you remember a few episodes ago, I mentioned that I wanted to do a Ghostbusters episode, but I had ordered a poster and it had not arrived. Okay. See, I wanted to do this when the new movie came out to tie it in, have some synchronicity there. So I ordered this poster from Amazon for a whopping $15. So I'm going all out on the budget for this episode. I spent $15 for the poster. Also, $15 for this magnetic frame, but I can use that for other things. Anyway, it was supposed to arrive in a couple days, and instead it arrived like, a month later. So this episode is very late. I have seen the Ghostbusters movie, Afterlife. I did like it. I mean, it's not a classic like the original, but I liked it. I felt like, I didn't really like Ghostbusters 2. I saw that when it was new. I saw both Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 at the theater during their original release. And I wasn't too crazy about Ghostbusters 2. I was disappointed, as I think most people were. And so the Afterlife, I think, finally gives that story an ending. I'm glad that we have another chapter in the same continuity that brings some closure to that storyline. So that's my thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, in this episode, we're not going to talk about Afterlife toys. We're going to talk about Kenner Real Ghostbusters, but specifically, we're going to talk about the Monsters. Now, at one time, I did have a Kenner Real Ghostbusters collection. I had all of the first series figures, all on cards with the original proton packs and whatever they call the ecto beams or whatever, photon beams. Those were weird toys. They came in a big card, and they had the figure, and then they had the pack, and had these squiggly beams. But I had all those original ones, and I didn't have all the different variants that came later. I just had the original set. But then I had some of the ghosts and the monsters, and I had the big stuffed Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and a lot of other things. So I don't have those now. What I have now are the Monsters. So here's an example of the Monsters. So this is what I kept. I got rid of all the ghosts and everything, and I kept the Monster series. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Here's my cat Billy down here. Are you going to come up here and say hi, Billy? Maybe later. You're probably, well, not probably, you're certainly watching this in no earlier than 2022. I mean, you might be watching it 10 years from now, I don't know. But you're not watching it in 2021. I'm recording it in 2021. You're watching it most likely in 2022. So for you, it's the new year. I hope your new year is off to a great start. And I hope we all have a great 2022. And I think I speak for a lot of people that I'm happy to see 2021 in the rear view mirror. But people always say that. At least, was there ever a time where most people looked back at the previous year and said, boy, that was a great year. I'm sorry to see this year end. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I felt that way. Boy, it's probably been a decade. Every year, I think, boy, am I glad that year's over. That's better, Billy. Here's my Billy. There's my Billy. Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't remember the last time that I looked at a year and said, boy, that was a great year. I mean, it seems like every year I'm just happy to see it end. And 2021's no exception. I mean, it's, as it has been for a lot of people, it's been a rough year for me. You'll remember that I totaled my car earlier in the year. And Billy has had a lot of health issues in the fall, and that's stressed me to the breaking point. I mean, there have been days where I've just practically collapsed. It's so stressful. I love my cat, and it's very hard to deal with knowing that he's not feeling good. So that's been hard. But he's had a good week this past week, and he's seemed happy and comfortable, and I hope that we're finding a path through this situation with Billy. That it's been a long road to try to figure out what's wrong and what do we need to do about it. A very expensive road, a very stressful, heartbreaking road. But I hope we're getting some answers now, and we're on the right path. It was good that he dropped in and said hello. He's been playing around as I've been shooting. So I hope Billy has a better 2022. I hope he has a healthy, happy, comfortable 2022. And if he has if my cat has a better year, I'll have a better year. And then, of course, we've had the pandemic, which dragged on another year, and oh my gosh. So I mean, that's just brought everybody down. And just I remember in the summer where we kind of thought it's over, and we started loosening up a little bit. That didn't last long, did it? As soon as we kind of let our guard down, here comes one variant, and here comes another variant, and now it seems like we're heading back to some kind of lockdown or something from things I'm hearing in the media. Oh boy. I would hope that 2022 finally sees an end to the pandemic. Whatever that means. I mean, this disease is going to be with us probably forevermore. It's not going to disappear. But I hope we find a way to deal with it so that life can move on and society can move on and we can all move on in a safe way. So I hope we all have a better year next year. I need a better year. I need one. I need a break. I need a better 2022, let me tell you. And I think we all do. I think the world does. I think the world needs a better year. I was thinking, should I do some kind of year-end episode, because I saw some YouTubers do that, and I'm like, I don't think that's not appropriate for this program. And what would it be anyway? Would I have like clips of me showing different toys, or like, remember when I showed you this toy? No, I mean, yeah, it wouldn't work for this. We're supposed to be talking about Ghostbusters, aren't we? Okay, so as I said, I used to have the big Kenner Real Ghostbusters collection, and as I did with a lot of things in the 90s, I sold it all off, except the monsters. So we're going to talk about these monsters. Now, here's something that I still have. I still have these bubble bath containers. I used to have more of them. I have these two, and they're both stained, and I don't know why, because they've just been sitting upright for 30 years. They haven't tipped over or anything, but I think there's, well, maybe not. I was going to say, yeah, there's pink, it looks like some kind of pink staining on them, so I don't know how that gets there, but yeah, let's take a look at these. Oh, that looks cool on camera. Look at that. So this is Slimer Bubble Bath. So this is the only non-monster thing, non-Ghostbusters monster item that we're going to look at. This is ectoplasm. It says Slimer Ectoplasm Bubble Bath. Who made this? This isn't Kenner, is it? I can't tell because it's all blotted out. So, I mean, it's not supposed to look like that. That pink, and it's not supposed to look like that. And you can tell that it is staining because look, it's going into the UPC area. But anyway, so this is kind of a soaky, actually. And we'll do an episode on soakies. But this is kind of a soaky. A later era soaky. But he's cute. He's cool. So, and they're light. I think this bubble bath is evaporating because they used to be heavy. I think the liquid in there is evaporating. Now, as I said, I saw the original Ghostbusters movie at the theater, and there were no toys when that movie came out. I don't think they were expecting it to be as big a hit and as big a cultural phenomenon as it was. And those actors really, at that time, before that movie, they were not really considered kid-friendly. I think people forget that the Saturday Night Live and Second City, that group of comics that came up in the mid-'70s into the early '80s, they were not considered kid-friendly. And a lot of the movies they were making were not supposed to be kid-friendly movies. Of course, kids watched them. I watched them. But they weren't supposed to be kids' movies. So I can understand why there wasn't like a Kenner. At that time, it probably would have been like a 3 3/4 inch, Star Wars style set of figures, like the Indiana Jones figures Kenner made. That's probably what they would have done if they'd made figures at the time of the movie's original release. But they didn't. There weren't any action figures when the movie was new in theaters. It took a few years, and by then toys had changed considerably, and we'd had He-Man and instead of the 3 3/4 inch format, toys had gotten bigger and bulkier, and it was a different style. So by the time Kenner finally released some Ghostbusters toys, they looked like this. And they were not based on the movie. And I was too old to play with toys. When these came out, I was past toy age, but I was still aware of them. And actually, the toys came out in 1986. So the Real Ghostbusters toys ran from 1986 to 1991. I started collecting toys in 1989. So they were still making new Ghostbusters toys when I was collecting. And most of the ones that I had as a collector, I bought it on clearance at Children's Palace. So they had the whole run from the very beginning. You could find anything at Children's Palace. All the Real Ghostbusters toys, from the very first series on, they were all there on clearance. I wish there was some video or photos or something of Children's Palace clearance aisles from the early 90s, because if there were material to make it out of, that would be a great documentary, a great toy collecting documentary. That would be wonderful. That was a miraculous time for a toy collector, because you had all these vintage or recent but no longer available toys. You had like Mego superheroes, like the 8-inch ones, all kinds of stuff being coughed up from the Children's Palace warehouses, filling these clearance aisles. I mean, that was quite a time to start collecting toys, because you could just push your shopping cart through those aisles and you had vintage collectible toys for clearance prices. Just fill your cart with them. And that's when I collected the Ghostbusters toys on clearance at Children's Palace, along with a bunch of other stuff. The line started in 1986, but the monsters didn't come out until 89. And I think there were 10 waves, and these, I believe, are the 5th wave. They're from the 5th wave of figures. In 1989, the Real Ghostbusters line began in 1986, some years after the movie. It wasn't, it didn't come, like I said, there were no toys when the movie came out. But later, based on the cartoon, the Real Ghostbusters cartoon, Kenner made this line of figures. And you can see in the back that there's quite a few, and I mean, that's not even showing all the different waves. I think that's just the current wave that the monsters belong to. So they made a ton of figures. It was a big line. But I think the most interesting thing is this Real Ghostbusters name, the Real Ghostbusters. Why is it the Real Ghostbusters? And so there was a TV show, a live-action TV show made by Filmation in 1975 called The Ghostbusters. Filmation in 1975 produced this live-action television show. It was a Saturday morning television show called The Ghostbusters. And yes, I watched it. I loved that show. I loved the Far Out Space Nuts, and I loved The Ghostbusters. And I think they were on back-to-back, those two shows, I want to say. But the Far Out Space Nuts was another live-action, goofy show. And both of those shows were very cheaply made. The Ghostbusters was a very cheaply made program. You had two, now we're veering way off these toys. There were three characters, Spencer, Tracy, Kong. Obviously Spencer Tracy, named after the actor, so you had one character named Spencer, one character named Tracy, and then one character named Kong. There were two human characters, two guys, and there was a gorilla. So of course the gorilla would be the one named Kong, right? No, Kong was one of the humans. The gorilla was named Tracy. So you had a human named Spencer, a human named Kong, and a gorilla named Tracy. And they were the Ghostbusters. The humans were played by Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch, who starred together in F Troop. The gorilla was played by Bob Burns. And Bob Burns is a very well-known collector. I've been to his house a few times and seen him at conventions. He's a very well-known collector of movie props, like screen-used movie props and memorabilia and toys. He's got a great toy collection. He's got a lot of stuff. And he's very well-known and well-liked in the hobby. But he was also a gorilla suit actor. And he played that gorilla. And he also played gorillas in films prior to that. He's done a good bit of ape suit, gorilla suit acting over the years. So he was the gorilla. So it was just a goofy show. These ghost characters would materialize and go, ha 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 ha, we're going to take over the world. We have some harebrained scheme. No one can stop us now. And then the Ghostbusters, those three characters would get an assignment to go stop the ghosts, and they have their home where they lived, like a home office. And then they go to like a haunted house or a graveyard or something, and they zap the ghosts. It was really goofy. But when the Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd movie, the famous Ghostbusters movie came out, I remember at the time thinking, well, is this based on the TV show? How can this be Ghostbusters? There already was a Ghostbusters. What is this? Where's the gorilla? I wanted to see the gorilla. Well, when the Ghostbusters movie was made, they didn't, I guess, they didn't know about this Saturday morning TV show from a few years earlier, and they paid a license to use the title Ghostbusters. So they paid Filmation a license to use that title. Flash forward a few years, we have a cartoon based on the movie Ghostbusters. Filmation makes a competing cartoon based on their live-action television Ghostbusters. So we have Filmation's Ghostbusters with two guys and a gorilla, the cartoon, and then we have the real Ghostbusters, which is based on the movie. And that's why it's called the Real Ghostbusters. That was the way they marketed the cartoon to differentiate it from Filmation's Ghostbusters. And there was a line of figures made based on the Filmation's Ghostbusters. And I wish I had that line, because as you might tell, I've spent an hour talking about the Filmation's show, and I'm supposed to be talking about these, and I'm just heck with that. I'm talking about Filmation's. I'm very fond of the Filmation's TV show. The toys are not based on the TV show; they're based on the cartoon. But I probably would be a little more giddy talking about the Filmation's Ghostbusters figures. But I don't have those. I should have those. Why don't I have those? I don't know if they're that expensive. I should probably have those, since I have such a childhood connection to that show. Not the cartoon. I was a teenager, I guess, when the cartoon was on TV, or maybe even, yeah, I guess I was probably my late teens when that started. So that's why you've got the Real Ghostbusters in Filmation's Ghostbusters. But I always thought it was just kind of bizarre that they didn't just let the brand stand on its own and just call it Ghostbusters, like Ghostbusters, and just to have confidence in the strength of the movie brand and subsequently the cartoon brand, that you didn't need to have this kind of snarky, the real Ghostbusters. It's kind of like a meta inside joke kind of thing, where you, like, if you don't know about the other cartoon, then it doesn't really make any sense, the Real Ghostbusters. It's just kind of weird. It's a little tacky. I wish they had not done that. They just would have called just Ghostbusters, because the other Ghostbusters isn't going to have this logo. Kids will know. Kids did know. And I was a kid when the movie came out, and I knew that's not the TV Ghostbusters. I knew there was, a difference there. So with these monsters, they're all based on Universal. Well, I'm holding up a zombie saying it's based on Universal. They're all based on classic monsters, like the Universal Studios type monsters. Obviously, there's a zombie here. It's not all Universal. They're not licensed, though. Unlike the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles monsters, those are licensed Universal Studios toys. These are not licensed by Universal, but they're based on the classic archetypal Universal style monsters. But not this one. This is a zombie. It's a voodoo zombie, not a George Romero zombie. So at last, we're actually going to see this toy that this episode is supposed to be about. Finally. So that is the zombie. Yeah, he's cute. And why do I start with him? It's just random. I have a pile of them stacked up next to me, and he was on the top of the pile. And what does he do? So all of these have a mechanism activated when you squeeze their legs. So you squeeze their legs. In this case, his eyes turn and his hair pops up for some reason, and his arms raise. So they all have some kind of action feature. And this is pretty common with Kenner at the time, like the Beetlejuice figures. Well, the Beetlejuice figures are very similar to the Ghostbusters figures, and they had similar action features. And some of these Ghostbusters monsters look like they could almost be Beetlejuice figures, because they're probably, I would assume, designed by the same team, most likely. And I used to have a big collection of Beetlejuice figures. Not now. I really like the Beetlejuice figures. They had a very interesting aesthetic, very unique. So put them over here. Now, I think this is my favorite character in the line. This is the Wolfman monster. And I should have said all of these are named this way, like the zombie monster, the Wolfman monster, the Quasimodo monster, the Frankenstein monster, the Dracula monster, the mummy monster. They're all in the name, like mummy monster. And I think, well, I don't know why they did it that way, but that might have been an effort to differentiate it from Universal characters, so they didn't have to pay a license. But here's the Wolfman monster. You see there, the Wolfman monster. And I like him. He's probably I think he's my favorite from the set. He's not like a Lon Chaney Jr. Wolfman. He's more like the Howling, more like a later era werewolf. You know, a canine werewolf. And you squeeze his legs, and his head rears back, and his jaws open, and his arms spread out. That's his action feature. None of them make any noise. There's no electronic sound or anything like that. But he's pretty cool. And I like that he has a tie. See his tie? It's just an odd choice to give him a tie. Kind of weird, kind of quirky. So here's the Dracula monster, and he's got a nice purple suit, all ready to cosplay Prince. I don't know what to say about him. I like his blue skin. I like the whole color scheme. Everything about him is unique. It's a unique take on what a vampire should look like. So when you squeeze his legs, his arms open to like spread his cape, and his mouth opens, and you can see fangs inside his mouth. The Dracula monster. So this is the mummy monster. Here's the mummy monster. He's unique. That's a unique take on the mummy. And here's that Beetlejuice connection. He's got this tiny little head. His bandages fall away to expose this little, almost shrunken head. And that's very much like a toy in the Beetlejuice line. So when you squeeze his legs, his arm falls off, and then the bandages on his head pop off. And then you see his little shrunken head, and I guess his arm just kind of drags along behind him. But he's got fabric bandages connecting his arm to the rest of his body and connecting his head, so that it. Let me see if you can you see the. You can almost see the fabric back there. So that when it all falls apart, it doesn't get lost. These pieces stay connected to the rest of the toy. And I think that's clever. It keeps the toy together. It gives the toy a kind of structural integrity, so it doesn't. All the pieces don't get lost. It's not simply a toy that just falls apart. Let's see here. We'll save him for last. Okay, now here is the Frankenstein monster. And I think he's my second favorite after the Wolfman. He's just a very well-designed take on a generic Frankenstein monster, and I like the choices they made with him. I like his posture, his the way his body's posed, its proportions. There are, well, I can imagine a lot of ways they could have gone with a Frankenstein monster for this set. But I think the choices they made were really perfect for the overall design of this toy series and the whole idea behind it. And he's just cute. He's a cute Frankenstein. Very 80s. A very 80s toy. Got 80s written all over it. Very late 80s, I should say. Because toys, I mean, if this had been made around the time that the movie came out, I think it would have looked much, much different. That was quite a time in the late 80s going into the early 90s. Like I said, you had the Beetlejuice figures, you had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all the Playmate stuff, you had the Dick Tracy, all these oddball toy lines. And then you still had some legacy toy lines from the 80s that weren't quite finished yet, like earlier in the 80s, or things that were discontinued but they were still hanging around on clearance. So it was kind of a nice time it was a good time to be a toy collector. Okay, so here's the Quasimodo monster. Oh, I didn't say what Frankenstein does. Well, I mean, Frankenstein, when you squeeze his legs, his arms raise up and his mouth opens. Nothing falls off or anything. But here's the Quasimodo monster. And they didn't call him the hunchback monster, they called him the Quasimodo monster. I can't imagine how these characters might have been depicted in the cartoon, or how they would have interacted with the characters in the cartoon. I mean, they were not in the cartoon. They were, I don't know if I really pointed that out, that yes, this line is based on the cartoon, but these monster characters were not in the cartoon. So I'll talk about that a little bit. And I like that the action feature in this hunchback is that he something actually happens. He doesn't just move. These chains come apart. He breaks his chains. His mouth opens and he breaks his chains. So that's a lot of these figures. They just you squeeze their legs and they just do this. Their arms wave. Their mouth opens. But he actually has like an action feature. He breaks out of these chains. So he actually does something. He doesn't just fall apart. He doesn't just raise his arms and open his mouth. He actually does have an action feature. He breaks his chains. He breaks free of his chains. Now, I wanted to save him for last because I had an interesting story. This episode's been delayed even longer than you think. It wasn't just this poster. I'll just put more here. I actually wanted to do this episode last season, like a year ago, and I discovered when I was preparing to do the episode that I didn't have Quasimodo. I thought for sure I had Quasimodo. I didn't have him. I don't know why I never bought him. Because all these things I bought, all the ones you've seen, I bought at a store. None of these, except for Quasimodo, none of these came from eBay. These were all store-bought. Except Quasimodo, when I was going to do the episode last season, I realized I don't have Quasimodo. Well, I got to buy one. Okay, that became an ordeal. I think this is my third Quasimodo. The first two, each one, arrived damaged. And I don't mean just a little thing, I mean decimated. So the first one I bought, and these are all different sellers. First one I bought arrived, it was a wreck. I said, I bought this particularly because it was in such nice condition. Now it's ruined. Sent it back, got a refund. The second one, you're going to see, arrived decimated. The seller didn't even want me to send it back. It was, toast. And I got a refund. And I was almost ready to give up. And so the third time was the charm. This is the third one that I bought, and it arrived safely. So that's why I didn't do the episode last season. Okay, so look at this crazy box. All right, now look at look what happened to that poor figure. That poor hunchback. Let's take him out here. And the seller did such a nice job trying to package the toy, the front of the toy, but he didn't do anything for the back. But he didn't. Nothing could have withstood this calamity. So here's the his poor little hunchback. He's a wreck. So I just got so disgusted. I put the episode off and said, "Well, I'll just do it next season." So now I'm in a position now where I can open this and demonstrate how it works. I guess we'll see, because no sense in saving him on a card. Ah, I'm free. No assembly required. There he is. There's the Quasimodo monster. He's pretty cute. And it's interesting, there's nothing supernatural about him. He's just an unfortunate man. But he can break out of his chain, so I guess he's got some super strength. So there's that. Okay, let's see him break his chains. Here's the big action moment. Let's see if this works. Okay, Quasi, break your chains. Okay. Well, he needed a little help there. Now let's see what he does. Ah, there you go. Ah. Sanctuary. Sanctuary. How does this go back in there? The arms. You can move the arms. Try this again with. Okay, Quasi, break from your chains. Let's go. Ah, there we go. Ah. He's cute. Poor little Quasi. I could just let me go back in there. I could just save him in there. I'll put him in a bag. But I'll throw this away. Okay. Well, that's it. I don't know how I'm going to edit this program because I really babbled and babbled talking about, first of all, the new year and the old year and all the problems, and then Filmation's Ghostbusters. I think I spent more time on Filmation's Ghostbusters than I did on the real Ghostbusters. But hey, at least it was kind of a cursed episode. Because like I said, I wanted to do it last year and this happened. And then I wanted to do it earlier in the season. I think I wanted it to be the one right after Halloween. And I didn't get the poster. Oh well, but finally, assuming that the images stuck to the digital recording devices, finally we got it done. It's a cute toy line. It's a cute set of classic monster figures, Universal style monster figures. And as I recall at the time, I don't think there was another Universal Monsters type of toy line at that time. If there was, it would have been the Playco, I guess. The Playco monsters would have been the contemporaries of this line, because the Imperial monsters, those were done, and the Turtle Universal monsters were still a couple years off. So I think the only other Universal Monsters toy line, action figure toy line, that would have been out around this time would have been Playco. But even then, I think, though, the Playco was a couple years later. So when these were in stores, I don't think there were any new classic monster figures in stores when these were new, when these were hanging on the peg hooks. I think this was it. These toys, they were the classic monster figures of that era, 1989. And it wasn't until the 90s when you got the Playcos, and then you got quite a few in the early 90s. There was a push for Universal Monsters in the early 90s. And then, of course, a big push in the late 90s, at the end of the decade. But going into the 90s, from 1989, at the end of the decade, going into the 90s, I don't think there was anything classic monster, Universal Monster related. I don't remember any major toy line with Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Mummy, with those characters. I could be forgetting something, but I think they carried the torch for the classic monsters from the 80s into the 90s. They carried the flag. They didn't let the flag touch the ground. I think they picked it up from maybe the Imperial Monsters and carried it into the 90s, and maybe the Playco Monsters took it and carried it onward into the decade. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks a lot. As I said, I hope you have a great 2022. I hope we all do. I hope it's a better year for all of us. Boy, do I hope it's better. I think you can see it just in my demeanor. Even sitting here now, doing this, I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling stressed right now. It's very hard to even sit here and do this. I'm feeling a weight of stress on me, and I hope it gets better. I hope a lot of things get better. Well, I'll see you very soon in the new year. Thank you very much for watching. Finally have my poster. Now that I have it, I'll probably just throw it away, because I'll never use it again. But I don't know, maybe I'll find some use for it. Thanks for watching, and until next time. Oh, hey, I haven't said this in a long time. Please subscribe to this channel. I have my little animation down there. Subscribe to this channel. Please subscribe to this channel. And click the bell icon so you'll be notified when more of these wonderful videos get uploaded, so you can watch more of this. And don't forget to join the Basement of Horror Facebook group. We have a Facebook group, and it's a good place to be. So join the Basement of Horror Facebook group. There'll be a link in the description. All right, now that's really it. I'm finished. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, Basement of Horror will return.